No, Donald Trump did not get it done in the third joint press appearance with Hillary Rodham Clinton, but he did announce his post-election campaign. Not a big, long review of last night's third and final, thank God, joint press appearance between the two major party candidates, because what's left to be said that hasn't been said after the previous two? You know, it's they are who they are, and they were who they were, and God help us all. But we will take a brief cursory review from three writers at nationalreview.com who I think really put the emphasis where it and the focus where it belongs, because as we all know, these joint press appearances and presidential campaigns are not debates, and it doesn't matter what one candidate or the other says about policy. Nobody remembers those things. I mean, in a country as polarized and divided and partisan as this country is in 2016, everyone basically knows each other's positions, each other's rhetoric, and so forth. So I guarantee you nobody is going to care. Nobody is going to remember anything of a policy nature that was said last night. I mean, sure, the partisans in each in their own existential bubbles will, say that will believe that the other candidate, the opposing candidate, whatever they said on this issue or that issue, oh wow, what a gaffe! Oh, that's terrible! That's just, she blew the debate with that, or he blew the debate with this, and on and onward and onward. But that happens in every so-called debate every 4 years. None of it's memorable. See, these are joint press appearances. They are not debates. And the only thing that is ever memorable from these exercises is, did one or the other of the candidates get off a great zinger that's memorable? Like, well, there you go again, for example. Or more likely, did one or the other of them fall into a huge gaffe that is the only lasting impression that voters, casual voters, low information voters, will take away from the encounter? Like Gerald Ford saying that Poland is not within the Warsaw Pact, or Al Gore trying to walk across the other side of the stage to George Bush's, where George W. Bush was in 2000, and try to menace him physically. Or John Kerry and his global permission slip. I mean, those are the kind of things that linger from these things. Sometimes if you get out a zinger, or a good line that really takes down the other candidate, and they don't react well to it, that just cements it. Or more often than not, if one of the candidates says something stupid that they shouldn't have said, and makes them look bad, because that's how you can tell. That is a measuring stick for who wins a presidential so-called debate. Which candidate looked better? And by that measure, Hillary Clinton won all three debates going away. She could hardly not, because it just gets back to the same thing, the same idea that Donald Trump is the only candidate that Hillary Clinton could ever have defeated. Because Hillary Clinton, just on her own, Hillary Clinton looks terrible. She's stiff. She's unlikable. She's robotic. She's like a life model decoy. I mean, she's programmed. She just sits up there with a totally insincere air, a totally insincere smile plastered across her saggy, jowly, ugly, hideous face. droning on, blah, 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 blah. It's like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. You know, blah, blah, children, blah, blah, families, blah, blah, whatever. And just, in any other set of circumstances, she couldn't help but be the candidate that looked worse, except against Donald Trump. Donald Trump made Hillary Clinton look reasonable. Donald Trump made Hillary Clinton look moderate. Donald Trump made Hillary Clinton look professional. Donald Trump made Hillary Clinton look sympathetic. He did it for all across all three debates, all three joint press appearances. I mean, the outcome and the public perception of these three encounters was preordained. Hillary Clinton was going to win all three of them because Hillary Clinton, though she is a lunatic, she doesn't look like one. She's too disciplined. She's too programmed to allow herself to look as bad as she really is. Whereas Donald Trump, I mean, he's as bad as Hillary, but the difference is he looks as bad as he is. And that's why Hillary Clinton won all three debates, because it's not about the debates, it's about who looks better. And Hillary Clinton looked better in all three encounters, but only because she's running against Donald Trump. So now let's get into the particulars of last night. First up, Jim Garrity at the corner last night. These are all from the corner at nationalreview.com. It's a cliche of debate coverage to declare there was no game changer, no knockout punches, but last night in the third and final presidential joint press appearance, there was no game changer and no knockout punches, except for one. And it was self-inflicted. Donald Trump declared he wasn't willing to commit to accepting the election results. By the way, he updated that today. He said, I'm perfectly willing to accept the election results if I win. It's just doubled down on this shooting yourself in the head 4 times gaffe. He contradicted his running mate, Mike Cuck Pence's answers on this question in the past few days. But that's not surprising. The grim implication is that on election night, Hillary Clinton could pass 370 electoral votes. She could pass 400. She could get them all. She could run the table, all 50 states. And Trump will not concede. Remember his brand, Trump always wins? And so if Trump doesn't win, then by definition, there's some sort of shady conspiracy going on to screw him out of his rightful victory. So Trump may instead declare the election has been stolen from him, no matter how big a landslide by which he loses. And to a lot of voters, that sounds like a sore loser refusing to acknowledge his own defeat and pouring gasoline onto an angry country, an already angry country, and lighting a match. Now, I want to just interject something here, a historical parallel, because if you buy the fiction that Donald Trump is a Republican, which he's not, the closest historical analog in modern times would be Richard Nixon. Left of center, vindictive, counterpuncher. Well, if you will recall, you can look it up on Wikipedia if you like, if you're not aware of this. In the 1960 election, that was the first presidential election in which Richard Nixon took part, and he lost by a razor-thin margin to John F. Kennedy, 1960. And there were, shall we say, irregularities in Illinois, specifically the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago was run by the Daily Machine. Democrats, in other words. And after the fact, it was established, it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the Democrats, through the Daily Machine in Chicago, stole Illinois from Richard Nixon and therefore stole the 1960 election for John F. Kennedy. That's right. Richard Nixon was rightfully elected in 1960, and the Democrats, JFK, the Daily Machine, stole the 1960 presidential election from Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon didn't contest the results. Richard Nixon didn't contest the results. Why did he not contest the results? Because he didn't want to rip the country apart. He didn't want to anger the country, divide the country. He accepted the results, he graciously conceded, and he came back 8 years later. Now, that's Richard Nixon, all right? The closest thing to a historical analog of Donald Trump, if you want to believe the fiction that Donald Trump is a Republican. It doesn't sound like Donald Trump is willing to follow Richard Nixon's example, does it? It sounds more like he's following Al Gore's example. And even compounding upon it, because as Susan Wright pointed out today at Red State, Al Gore didn't announce, I'm not conceding the election results 3 weeks before the election. He only, in fact, on election night, he had conceded. He had called up George W. Bush to concede, and then he rescinded that concession. So even Al Gore didn't contest the election results until after there were election results. Now here Donald Trump is 3 weeks in advance saying, I'm not going to accept the election results if they don't favor me. So this is worse than Al Gore, ladies and gentlemen. This is worse than Al Gore, Trumplicans. Is that the result you want your candidate to follow? And remember also that in 1960, the country was not angry like it is today. It wasn't divided like it is today. So is that really what you want your candidate to do? To pour napalm on an already raging fire? To tear the country apart even worse than it already is? To maybe, who knows? Riots in the streets, civil war, barricades, chaos. Is that what you want? Because I guarantee you the left would love that. The left, I mean, they would be, that's right in their wheelhouse. They would be more than happy to oblige. Which leads to the theory, amply supported and growing more amply supported all the time, that Donald Trump is a sleeper agent, an infiltrator from the Democrats designed to not just screw the GOP, but give the left everything they want that they could not get for themselves, but can via Donald J. Trump. Now, is there a legitimate concern about fraudulent votes? Sure. But most of the states, and again, I wish, I really wish years ago, 2012 election, I really wish that I had talked to Douglas V. Gibbs and tried to reason with him. I mean, what I wound up saying was, well, even if there was voter fraud, even if Romney really won the election, Obama officially won, and so I mean, he would have to investigate himself, so it's not going to happen. They're going to bury it. So regardless of whether it's true or not, a ridiculous idea or not, a conspiracy theory or not, it's a done deal. We're never going to find out. It's never going to be investigated. But I really wish I had talked Douglas V. Gibbs in off the ledge. This notion that, well, Romney really won. no, Romney didn't really win. I mean, he only won 206 electoral votes. In all, if you take, like he carried North Carolina. If he takes Ohio, where there were a bunch of irregularities, fine. He still lost Ohio by what 40,000 votes. So I mean, that's an awful lot of votes to manufacture, with nobody finding out about it. But even so, what would that would have been 18 electoral votes. So okay, Romney wins 224 electoral votes, and Obama wins 314, and Obama's still reelected. You know, I mean, I really wish I had, and I really wish that this had taken place on the air on American Daily Review, on Constitution Radio, that Barack Obama won the 2012 election. He ran the Electoral College 332 to 206. He won the popular vote by just under 3 percentage points, about 5 million votes. Now, voter fraud becomes a factor when it's really razor thin, neck and neck photo finish. I mean, the 2000 election was over, what, fewer than 2,000 votes in Florida. That's why it became a thing. I mean, remember how in 2004 when John Kerry was threatening to, well, I've got my lawyers on hot standby, and then, you know, he lost Ohio by 50,000 votes. And what did John Kerry do? Did he launch his legal assault, his post-election campaign? No, he really didn't. Why do you think that is? Do you think that if John Kerry could have sued his way to the presidency that he wouldn't have? But he didn't, because he couldn't. Because voter fraud of that magnitude is, as a practical matter, it is an impossibility. It's just not practical. It's not logistically possible. I mean, this term that Trump uses, that, oh, it's rigged. Rigged. The election's rigged. Do you realize what that entails? He's not talking about, well, the media is biased against me. That's not rigging the election. That just means the media is biased against you. So, and it's not even talking about voter fraud, because for an election to be rigged, the voter fraud has to be from the very top. And it also means 50 different state election rigging operations. And a lot of these battleground states, swing states, are run by Republicans. Do you think that Republican secretaries of state in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Florida, do you think that they are going to rig the election against their own party's nominee? I mean, come on. It's just, it's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's idiotic. Give it up. Live in the real world. Live in the real world, Trumplicans. Own your candidate's failures, since he'll never own them. He'll never take ownership of them. And own the fact that you nominated a candidate that couldn't win. Just admit, this was, for you people, this was never about stopping Hillary Clinton. It was always about burning down the Republican Party. You people are the ones who guaranteed Hillary Clinton's victory, which, frankly, I wouldn't have thought was possible. I mean, the voter fraud, forget it. Forget it. Hillary Clinton is going to win by approximately 10 million popular votes. She's going to carry over 350 electoral votes. It's not going to happen, Trumplicans. It can't, you cannot explain away the magnitude of the election results, the magnitude of defeat of your candidate through voter fraud. You can't do it. It's stupid. It's crazy. It's cartoon, batshit insane. Give it up. Live in reality. Because until you live in reality and accept reality, you can't change it. And then nominating Donald Trump had nothing to do with reality. It had to do with just make-believe nonsense. You went off to the land of make-believe. You just pretended, well, Trump is going to take a hammer to everything, and he's going to carry New York. He's going to carry Connecticut. He might even carry California. No. No. Currently, 187 electoral votes, according to election projection. Down, or projected to lose 51% to 44% in the popular vote. The biggest defeat in 20 years. And that's not voter fraud. Oh, polls are biased. They're not that biased. They're not that biased. So is there a legitimate concern about fraudulent votes? Sure there is. Of course voter fraud exists at the margins. And most of the states are going to have margins beyond 100,000 votes. Based on past elections, some may have margins only in the tens of thousands. States like California, Texas, and New York could well have margins of more than 1 million votes. If it comes down to another Florida in 2000 scenario, it's a different story. But right now, Trump needs a remarkable, unprecedented comeback in a slew of swing states just to get close to 270. And by the way, in this mass communication age of instant social media and cell phones and smartphones and this and that and the other and Twitter and Facebook and whatever else, does anybody seriously believe that there could ever be another scenario, like an election night scenario like 1948? Dewey defeats Truman. Ha ha! No, he didn't. You think that could happen? Today, with Twitter? Social media? Guess again, Riddler. Ain't happening. Now, Trump had two particularly bad moments between his refusal to say that he will accept the election results on election night. His exact words were, "I'm going to keep you in suspense." Oh, joy. You know, that gave Hillary Clinton the opportunity to get off what, for her, passes as a zinger when she said, "Well, that's horrifying." Which is hypocritical on her part, because she was, just like all the other Democrats, she spouted the same line about, well, Bush was selected, not elected, and blah, 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 and Al Gore really won. But, I mean, is the media, I mean, stop and think about this. How smart do you have to be, Trump supporters, if the media is biased against your candidate, and he says, well, I'm not going to accept the election results unless I win, and she says something blatantly hypocritical like, well, that's horrifying. Yeah, horrifying if someone on the other side does it. Not if Democrats do it. What do you think is going to get more coverage, her hypocrisy or his sore loserism? You people bitch and moan about media bias, and then you feed right into it. And Trump's insistence that the accusations of groping and other sexual misconduct have been proven false and debunked, which they have not been. It's the diametric opposite. I mean, this is just delusional and counterfactual. He had some better answers in policy, particularly on guns, abortion, and Supreme Court justices and Hillary Clinton scandals, but he never meant any of it, and nobody's going to remember that stuff because it's not entertaining. I won't accept the election results on election night unless I win. That's entertaining. That's drama. That's reality television. And that's what the voters wanted. They wanted to be entertained because if they had wanted any kind of serious policy debate, we would be talking about the Rubio-Sanders debates, not Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I mean, with the latter matchup, we've got sore loserism, we've got post-election insurrections, we've got sexual predators and groping women and grabbing pussies, and people want to be entertained. They don't want to be governed, and they voted accordingly. And this is what you get. This is what you get when the culture goes absolutely down the crapper, and politics is downstream from it. People don't want a presidential election. They want American Idol. They want to see, who's going to get voted off the island, Hillary or Trump? That's what they want. That's what they're getting. A fair question is how many voters were still watching the end of the encounter last night. Debate viewership dropped between the first and second debate. It always does. I mean, unless there's a reason to believe that the sequel will, or the next round, if you will be more entertaining than the first. But how could it be, aside from the novelty of seeing Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump on the same stage, how could there be any novelty to it? Because these are the two most well-known politicians in the country. You're not going to watch the second debate and the third debate expecting a different Hillary Clinton or a different Donald Trump. Neither are capable of reinventing themselves on the fly. Reinventing themselves at all, really, but certainly not on the fly. Certainly not in the 2 weeks between each debate. They are who they are. And people saw it in the first debate. And so fewer tuned in because they're not going to change. You're just going to see more of the same. And one was all that it really took. See, a fair question is how many voters are still watching. Debate viewership drop between the first and second debate. We would expect it to drop even further for the third one. Trump has to hope that enough voters are still open to voting for him, that those voters were watching last night, and that they preferred his answers on policy more than his flat denials of behavior he previously boasted about, and the implication that he'll deny the legitimacy of election results if he loses. But which of those three items is the most entertaining and which is the least entertaining? I think we know. David French, in the Quarter at National Review last night, concluded, and it's hard to argue with him, that last night's third joint press appearance perfectly sums up the state of the 2016 presidential race. And that's just as depressing as it sounds. He watched the last 15 months. We've watched the last 15 months summarized in 90 brutal minutes. Two unfit candidates aggressively attacked each other's multiple, obvious, gaping, and devastating weak spots. And then Trump decided to go ahead and dominate the next two news cycles with a colossal unforced error. Pretty much like the other two joint press appearances. And if they had 10 more, they'd all end up the exact same way, because Trump is who Trump is. The very instant that Chris Wallace explained to Trump that both his running mate and his daughter had said they would accept the results of the election, I knew that Trump was going to dive into the deep end, because that's who he is. He simply cannot resist looking like the toughest guy in the room. And if he can do it by showing Mike Cuck Pence who's boss, then all the better. He's a counterpuncher, remember? So he says the one thing guaranteed not to just send the media into a frenzy. He says something that everyone but his most die-hard zombie cult Kool-Aid drinking supporters knows is absolute cartoon level batshit crazy that he's going to keep us in suspense. Yet, here's the thing. You can be tough on voter fraud without jolting the American people. You can say something like, Chris, I believe in upholding and protecting the laws of this nation. And that means respecting the integrity of the ballot box and the peaceful transition of power. I mean, was that so difficult to come up with? I mean, just coming up with that on the fly, this shouldn't require preparation. This should be instinctive. I mean, it really is that simple. Trump's ego and his authoritarian instincts, his strongman dictator wannabe instincts, would not permit it. You see, Trump is losing. I don't care what his supporters say. I mean, and you know what? Douglas V. Gibbs posted a review of last night's joint press encounter, and he was trumpeting, he was megaphoning the Trump line. Oh, massive voter fraud! This election is going to be stolen from Trump. Trump's really ahead. No, he's not. Trump is losing badly. He's getting his ass kicked. He's getting his nuts handed to him. And if he had hoped to reach beyond his Breitbart base and nose-holding cuck-servatives, that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it. You got to get beyond your base. I mean, that's been the debate for years. I mean, well, do you move to the center or do you attract the center towards you? Strike contrasts with your Democrat opponent. The former was the so-called Nixon strategy. The latter was the Reagan strategy. The Reagan strategy was always more successful. I mean, sure, you can attack Mrs. Clinton's multiple weaknesses. Who couldn't? Yeah, you can remind voters of her terrible record as Commissar of State. Who couldn't? Aside from Trump on both of these areas. Yes, you can and should defend the Second Amendment, which Trump really doesn't believe in. But all those things are just markers of minimal GOP political competence, and Trump didn't even reach that threshold. Threatening to question the legitimacy of the election will not turn Virginia or any other currently blue state red. And one last thing. It's telling that even when the two candidates were at their best, Trump on life and judges, and in other words, he was doing a fairly, barely decent, barely adequate acting job because Trump is pro-abortion and he wants to put his partial birth abortion zealot sister on the Supreme Court. And Mrs. Clinton on Russia, NATO, and pursuing ISIS out of Iraq and into Syria, where apparently she's prepared to blunder her way into a war with Russia. I'm going to impose a no-fly zone over Syria. Oh, really? Even with Russian troops, Russian forces, and a Russian S-300 air defense missile system in place, which would get U.S. planes, U.S. pilots shot down. Oh, man. We're so screwed. But despite that, it's telling that even when the two candidates were at their best, we can't believe a word they say. Well, in Mr. Gibbs's debate review, one paragraph after another. Why didn't Trump say this? Why didn't Trump say that? Two reasons, Doug. One, Trump is an idiot. He's an ignoramus. And two, Trump doesn't believe what you want him to say. If Donald Trump were really a conservative, he would have said these things because he would have known to say these things. They would have been instinctive to him. They're not. He is a New York liberal Democrat. When he says something that just comes to mind instinctively, well, you get things like, well, I'm going to keep you in suspense. And I grab him by the pussy. That's what comes to his mind instinctively, because that's what he thinks about. I mean, Trump has been all over the place on every single issue. Planned Parenthood, judicial appointments, abortion, immigration especially, the economy, taxes, infrastructure spending where he's going to outbid Mrs. Clinton no matter what it takes. No reform of entitlements. Totally off the table. Again, a bidding war. Connect the dots, Doug. Jeez, criminy. Mrs. Clinton's record as Commissar of State helps set the table for the present challenge. Moreover, her answer on gun control, claiming that D.C.'s draconian crackdown on gun owners was little more than a toddler protection act, it's for the children, was laughable. If you're voting on judges only, and no one should vote on judges only, Mrs. Clinton reaffirmed every single one of your worst fears, rendering a Republican Senate more vital than ever. And by the way, Pat Toomey has retaken the lead in Pennsylvania. So currently, according to election projection, Republicans would maintain, if the election were held today, Republicans would retain their Senate majority. It would be only 51-49, but they would retain the gavels, which is kind of important given who's going to win this presidential election. I mean, there are winnable elections that matter. Increasingly, well, not increasingly, this was always the case, the race at the top of the ticket is not and never has been one of them. And lastly, but not leastly, Jonah Goldberg at the corner last night at National Review. Now, much like the first debate and grading on the Trump curve, Trump had a good start. He started more disciplined and sustained that discipline longer than in either of the previous joint press encounters. He won on many issues that nobody will remember, particularly abortion, though he didn't mean it for a second. But for about 30 minutes in, that's about as long as Trump can manage, Trump started interrupting and showboating. It wasn't much, you're the puppet! You're the puppet! You're the puppet! It wasn't much at first, but it got worse and worse. The tipping point was his refusal to turn on Vladimir Putin. He said nice things about me, is a line he always has to get in. It's so strange because he honestly seems to think that repeating this helps him. It doesn't. After months of criticism that Trump is easily swayed by flattery, his ego is his biggest liability, ladies and gentlemen. When he points out that Putin flattered him and suggests that's a valid reason for not overly antagonizing Putin, it only reinforces the critique. And it's dangerous. Do you want somebody as President of the United States who could be manipulated that easily? More to the point, few are impressed that Putin complimented Trump. And those who are undoubtedly voting for Trump, those who are undoubtedly are voting for Trump already. Meanwhile, the few persuadable voters left are probably less likely to vote for him when he says things like that. The reasons I just shared with you. And that's just one example. When Trump snaps, "What a nasty woman," at Mrs. Clinton, what voters not already enthralled with Trump or resigned to voting for him are brought into his column. When he blurts out, "Wrong!" who at that point is charmed by that? Of course, I suppose you could say that it was progress for Trump not to refer to Hillary Clinton to her face on stage on national television as a ball-busting cunt. You know he wanted to say that, too. What a cunt. That's what he wanted to say. He dialed that down to "what a nasty woman." He probably also meant that in the context of, well, he'd never grab Hillary Clinton's pussy because she's ugly. Which she is. But that's not the point. Now, I agree with the already gelled conventional wisdom that Trump's biggest blunder came when he said we'll just have to wait and see whether he accepts the results of the election. Which, again, he clarified today by saying, "I'll accept the results if I win." Now, whatever arguments you want to make in defense of the response are irrelevant, and judging from the ones I've heard on TV, pretty pathetic. He basically gave the media remember the media that's biased against him, carte blanche to freak out over his answer for at least a week and probably the remaining 3 weeks until November 8th. Now, don't get me wrong, I think his answer was awful, but even if I didn't, it was strategically stupid! Stupid! Unless the goal is to further alienate his core supporters from mainstream American politics in order to create a television network for the ranks of the disaffected as part of Operation Destroy the GOP. Keep the Republican Party hopelessly divided, fractured, shattered, so that there can be no organized right-of-center opposition to President Rodham. But where I dissent somewhat from the conventional wisdom is the notion that Trump was doing great until that one response. The fact is, he lied repeatedly and shamelessly. And the fact that Hillary Clinton was doing the same thing doesn't change it, doesn't excuse it. Most importantly, about all of the stories of his sexual advances being debunked, they have not been. I loved him saying over and over that nobody has more respect for women than he does. Nobody? Of course, what he meant when he said that, he was meaning he loves women with big tits. That's what he meant. He was doing better than he has in previous debates, and he was even scoring real points, but he simply wasn't doing anything to get voters to see him in a fresh light. Like that would be possible after 40 years of being Donald Trump. And when you're this far behind, you need, yes, Trumplicans, Trump is way behind. Then you need to add voters to your column. He didn't do that. I don't think he could have done that, but he didn't even try. And that should be unforgivable. You see, the people who should be most upset with Donald Trump after these 3 debates is his own supporters. And if they weren't Kool-Aid drinking zombie cultists, they just might be. If they hadn't turned off their brains 16 months ago, they might be. But they did, so they're not. As for Hillary, she, as ever, was plodding, uninteresting, deceitful, and arrogant. But she was facing Donald Trump. So none of that got highlighted. Even by contrast. She made no major mistakes because she understood all she needs to do is sit on her lead, run out the clock, and make this election a referendum on Donald Trump, which it is, was always going to be, and has always been. Think about that for a minute. In any other circumstances, this election would have been a referendum on the past 8 years and Hillary Clinton being an extension of it. But no. It's a referendum on Donald Trump, and Hillary Clinton just gets to hide all her weaknesses and say, vote for me, I'm not him. And it's working. It's working. Thanks to Trumplicans. Of course, if you know anything about the issues, or if you listen carefully to her answer, she just confirmed what a corrupt, dishonest, uncompelling politician she really is. And yes, a ball-busting cunt. I can say that because I'm not running for president. She speaks in white noise, even when she's saying outrageous or ridiculous things. And she does say outrageous and ridiculous things, but she does it in such a way that it doesn't sound that way. It's not obvious that that's what she's doing. Trump, he's incapable of not being obvious. You know, subtle would be, I'd love to take her to dinner, get to know her a little better. He says, but Trump, he says, I grab her pussy. They let me do it because I'm rich and famous. He's already drunk with power. You want to give him the presidency? All of which should be embarrassing to the Trump train.
Come on! Nice and easy! Don't look down! That's it! You're doing fine!
Given how Mrs. Clinton is absolutely wiping the floor with him. But Trump supporters are the only ones who are surprised by that.